afternoon, and welcome to this week's episode of LevelUp Cyber Live. My name is Tony Bryan. I am your host. And today I'm excited to be joined by Chris Cockburn. Welcome, Chris.
Hey, Tony. Thanks for having me.
So today's going to be a fun one, topic that's near and dear to my heart and pretty historical to the evolution and start of CyberUp. And it's really this idea of, ways to get into cybersecurity through federal service and through the military, right? Great pathways and lots of opportunities provided for both. But before we jump in, Chris, I'd love for you to take a chance and just introduce yourself to the group.
Absolutely. Yeah, so Chris Cockburn. I am a cybersecurity advisor with the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, based here in St. Louis. Prior to coming to CISA and taking this role, I spent a total of about 24 years with the Air Force. 22 years of that was active duty. Retired as a senior master sergeant, working as a 1 Bravo 4 or a cyber warfare operator. My time in the military brought me up from working on the flight line for a little bit, then went into enterprise services, supporting the larger Air Force network, into cyber warfare, doing some offensive and defensive type stuff. And then when I decided to retire, I did transition out to the private sector for a little bit. Went over and worked for Centene, a healthcare company here in the St. Louis area. Found that it just wasn't a fit for me. Great team, great company to work for. I didn't have the same ethos, so that it didn't match my ethos. So I decided to get back into the DoD. Joined the Air Force as a contractor and then a civilian until this position came up. My latest careers with the Air Force, I was doing was a planner on a cyber protection team. So now I'm here with CISA, and I'm a cybersecurity advisor for critical infrastructure. Work very closely with state, local, tribal, and territorial governments, and then critical, owners and operators of our critical infrastructure, stuff that we rely on every day.
So CISA does some great stuff, right? And I think this topic, again, for me, is just education is always one of those things, and experience. And I know, the big kind of conundrum within trying to get that first job is, it's hard to get a job without experience. And, the federal government does an incredible job of investing in its talent and investing in the humans that work there, really around just professional development and certification. So it gives you an opportunity to learn so much and then get firsthand experience at everything. And oftentimes I would, comment and say the military is the world's largest apprenticeship program, and it's been around forever, right?
It's
a great model.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate the opportunity I had in the air that was presented with the Air Force. You can come in to the service and pick one job and then decide down the road you want to do something else. And they got avenues for you to shift. When I first joined the Air Force, I was a mechanic on the flight line. Decided that wasn't something I wanted to do. So I retrained, and they put me into being a computer operator. It's all, the military is not for everybody. It's all what you make of it. But there's a great opportunity there to learn a skill and be able to take that skill. I wouldn't be where I'm at today if it wasn't for what the Air Force did for me.
I feel like I've shared this about 95 times, but I was military and the military police and the Army, and I was 18 years old, and they said, "Here's a gun, here's a car, go enforce rules, laws, and regulations," right? As a 18-year-old kid, and it always blows my mind to think of just like trying to simulate that type of scenario in the civilian world, and it just doesn't happen. So,
yeah, well, and you add to that too. I mean, me and my wife, we got married young, but we were 18 and 19 and running around Europe, right? So not only was I getting that opportunity to learn skill and a trade, which came with benefits and stuff, we also got to see the world. So there's a lot of benefits there for going the military route.
I think both of us would be on the pro-military side, and I have 4 kids and 2 graduating high school, and I'd hoped that maybe one would go down that road and figure out the military, and maybe they do, right? I was not wasn't what I had envisioned doing when I was graduating high school, and then quickly realized, and through poor choices and bad grades, that college, I was not quite mentally prepared for college and needed to find something different, right? And the military does a great job of, to your point, traveling, seeing the world, and I saw a lot of countries, some good, some bad, right? Just depends
Yes.
on where you're at. And then just the learning opportunities. And you do have a lot. You have, I'm not going to say a lot of control, because you are, government, and you're
Sure.
military. You're in the military, and they're gonna do what mission dictates. But there are a lot of opportunities that you could do. So for those that maybe aren't necessarily familiar with CISA, tell a little bit about the agency and the organization. That would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So CISA is a subcomponent to the Department of Homeland Security, right? So DHS was stood up after 9/11, and CISA's coming up. We just hit 4 years old, so we're a very young agency, but our role is to help secure critical infrastructure, whether that's from a physical perspective or from a cyber perspective. We go in and we help look at critical infrastructure with the owners and operators. We assess, what their security posture looks like. We have resources that we can provide them, recommendation or options that they can put into place to better secure it. And we talk about critical infrastructure. We're talking about transportation, food, healthcare, government facilities, things like that. There's 16 different critical sectors, and we work across all those different 16. We also have a team that's responsible for making sure chemical facilities are safe, right? That they've got the right things in place, that things aren't going to blow up, or people aren't going to be exposed to some nasty stuff. So on any given day, I could be giving a presentation. I could be sitting on site with a stakeholder, assessing their programs. We have some free services we can connect them with. A lot of networking. I work very closely with the FBI, the Secret Service, our local fusion centers, and then state and local government entities. So I think from a high level, that's really what CISA is. It's all about making sure our critical infrastructure is secure, and our way of life isn't impacted because something went down.
I've always heard it as, CISA is there before something bad happens, right? Like it's,
Yep.
It's the prep and the systems, and just making sure that you have all the things that you need. And then if something does happen, that's when your investigators, your FBI,
Absolutely,
will jump in. So, I know time and time again that, oh my gosh, I want to work with the federal government. I don't want to run my systems, but not all things are bad. And there's a lot of free resources, especially for, I think of the critical infrastructure side of just small to rural water plants, electric co-ops, school districts.
Yes.
There's so much need in those areas of in the community that, the role that you guys play is important. And then shameless plug, if you're interested to learn more and just kind of hear about some of the resources, this Thursday, this is Tech Week in St. Louis. So there's, 300 events this week. There's a lot of stuff going on in the St. Louis market, but we have a specific cybersecurity event happening Thursday, and Chris is joining us and is just going to talk about all the resources available for businesses to plug into. So
absolutely.
Hop on. I'd say just the easiest way is Google STL Tech Week, and there's a website that'll pop up all the events, and there's a lot of great stuff going on this week.
Yeah.
A lot of virtual too, so you're able to dial in if you aren't located here in St. Louis. So, so with that, let's just dive in. So, I want to make the title of this is really centered around paths into cybersecurity through federal and military. So, let's I'm gonna pass it to you and say let's jump into that topic.
All right. Well, I think where I'll start at is, we've talked about the military, and I think, the easiest way to get into the military, is obviously talk to somebody that's already there, or go to a recruiter and start talking to a recruiter. The one thing I will say though is when you start going down that path of maybe the military, ask a lot of questions, right? Make sure you get things in writing. You understand what you're being presented, what options you have to best pick the route that fits for you. Question. That's really important. The other piece too, either whether it's through the military or in the civilian sector, well, the private, the public sector going for a civilian type career, is networking, right? So most people know you can go out to USA Jobs and see what jobs are open, but as with any other type of work, whether it's private or public, who you know helps, right? So that's how you get to build your reputation. People know how you're a hard worker. They understand how you interact with people. People are more likely to to help get you into a role. So networking is very important when it comes to finding the right position for yourself. But understanding too what those positions look like. So for instance, on USA Jobs, if you're interested in a position on USA Jobs, you need to understand what series is that? What does that mean? We all of our jobs are kind of put together in a series or like a career field. And so when we talk cyber, those are 2210s, right? And so when you go out to USA Jobs, you're gonna be looking for those 2210 type positions. And there's a box to check when you're doing your search to do that. But there's more than just getting into USA Jobs and finding those jobs. There's many programs to come into the federal government. There's a lot of internships. Each of the agencies, whether it's the Air Force, it's DHS, it's CISA, the FBI, they've got internship programs. They've got programs to help pay for college. They'll bring in college folks through internship programs, developmental positions, things like that. So for instance, my time here at Scott Air Force Base, and I worked for the cyber protection teams, we had these positions we call developmental positions, where we'd bring somebody in at a lower level, what we call a GS7 or a GS9, and we would put them through a training track so that at the end of 3 years, they're now a GS12, and they're fully qualified, right? So knowing that those programs are available and knowing how to find them is pretty important. So I would say if you're looking for a transition into federal service, go to those agency websites, look for their career links, and just start digging down into it, or reach out to somebody that that's within those environments, and ask questions, right? So I talk to people all the time. I love to help mentor folks into finding these types of positions. So connect, network, talk to people. Don't hesitate to reach out to me if there's any questions. I'm more than willing to talk about it. Anything to say about that, Tony?
I was going to say, the military is kind of a no-brainer, right? You can talk to a recruiter, score okay in your ASVAB, and the rest is history, so they say, right? And I know that they were working on programs for some of those folks that maybe have been in industry for quite some time, where you could come in with a degree and have, attain a little bit higher rate because they were higher ranked, because there was just the military has been kind of, much like the civilian world, there's been a shortage in talent available, and for military folks to join, because recruitment numbers are down. I think I heard a statistic, Marine Corps not that long ago was the first time they ever didn't hit a quota, right? Like it just blows my mind. It's crazy.
Well, and I think that's a good point, right? So the military doesn't have to be a lifetime. You don't have to spend 20 years in if you don't want to. And they're getting competitive like that, right? They've revamped the retirement process so that you don't have to do 20 to get retirement, right? So there's different things in there. A lot of folks come in just do 4 years, 6 years, primarily to build those skills, and then they'll transition into the civilian sector. And that's perfectly fine. That's a great way of going. I would say though, just going straight to a recruiter, our recruitment teams are great. But that self-education up front, understanding what a position looks like, what do they actually do? There's a title, right? You can assume what it is, but if you can find somebody that's in the military that has connections to somebody that's in that job, reach out. A lot of your military members are, they'd like to talk about that, So have an understanding. Don't just go in and start signing paperwork and find out that you're not doing what you want to do.
I have vivid memories of my recruitment process, and just ask questions and go in informed, and kind of stick to your guns and make sure you're getting what you want to get, and read all the fine lines. That's not an attempt to say all recruiters are bad, but obviously there's needs and quotas, and sometimes there are jobs that we're going to throw bonuses out there, right? Some of the less desirable jobs, and they're going to try to push you towards that role. But if you've got a clear kind of vision or path. I mean, I wanted to be military police. I was told no. I'm like, great, thanks. I'll, I did the old car sales tactic. Well, I guess I'm going to leave. And and then they caught me before I walked out the door, and they said, oh, wait. Oh, by the way, you can go do that job. And it worked out. So, so on the USA Job, it's a massive website, right? And I think it scares a lot of people. It's a different beast in terms of of how you would structure a resume, right? Like it's a different beast in how the use of KPIs and words and things, right? There's algorithms and things that you have. I don't want to say you have to beat, because I don't think that's the right word, but in order for you to get picked up and triggered to get recommended, what would be some advice that you would give for somebody looking at like USA Jobs and like, man, I really want this thing? What advice would you give for them on how they would structure their application?
Well, yeah, I'll approach this from two different angles. USA Jobs is not the only way in, right? So I'll be honest, both of my positions that I took with here in the government as a civilian, neither one of them were directly through USA Jobs. They were through what we call a direct hiring authority. And so the 2210 series of positions, so these what falls under 2210 is anything that's IT related or cyber related, whether it's configuring routers and switches, or on a cyber protection team, as an analyst or something like that. They're all going to fall into that 2210 umbrella. For a number of years, the 2210s have had this authority called direct hire, which means that you don't necessarily have to go to USA Jobs to apply. If you know somebody, you can pass them your resume, right? So that's where that networking piece comes into play, and then they can get you injected into the hiring system that way. And when you go that route, the structure of your resume isn't necessarily as important, right? It's going to be handed to somebody that's within that hiring chain, and they'll be able to glean out of that resume what they need. Now, you're right. From a USA Jobs perspective, that can be a gauntlet to get through. And really, what you need to do is when you look at that advertisement, really break down what's the knowledge, the skills, and the abilities they're looking for. That's KSAs, like you mentioned, and make sure that when you're doing your resume, you're addressing those things in your resume using very similar terms that are in that job posting. Knowing that some of these postings are extremely generic. They're written to be used as an umbrella to bring in multiple people in through that job posting. So the key there, though, is making sure that you're addressing those things that are within that posting, so that when somebody looks at that resume, keep in mind they may not be a cyber person at all, right? It's a clearinghouse, right? They're going to look for things. Okay, does it have this information? Yep, and it matches. The other thing too is, we're taught, typically you want to have like a 2-page resume. You want your resume to be short and sweet. That's not the case for USA Jobs. Put your whole past on there, right? It's kind of daunting is when you're in the hiring side of it and you're reading through 6 or 8 pages resumes. I like the shorter resumes myself, but that's not the way USA Jobs works, and the government hiring processes. We want to know what that whole background is. So does that kind of get to what you're thinking about there, Tony?
Yeah, for sure. The the other piece, you mentioned the internship aspect earlier,
yes.
Right? And I think there are a lot of agencies that exist that, i.e., like the Secret Service, that all have cyber folks and cyber roles that they're hiring for. I was surprised to learn that TSA is, doing a pretty big cybersecurity role out in some programs. So I think most people are going to say, oh, well, DHS collect, that makes sense. DOD collect, that makes sense. But when you start thinking of some of these other agencies, and FBI is kind of a no-brainer, but you're looking at TSA, you're looking at Secret Service. There's lots of options out there to do it, and even NSA as well. And there are a lot of internships that go out, right? And I think the larger agencies and NSAs have a very sophisticated internship program, right? Where they've got strategic partnerships with these college universities, and they're building oftentimes their NSA centers of academic excellence that they're getting recruited from. But places like Scott Air Force Base, I remember pretty vividly several years ago where they had an internship for one of the commands out here. I think they got a total of maybe 2 or 3 applications for 2 jobs, right? Like it was a very low number of people that applied. So I imagine there are people that would be listening and they're out there like, man, there's a lot of time and effort in this. I'm not going to apply. I'm not going to get this job. Why would I apply? But when you see things like 3 applicants for 2 roles, you never know what you're going to get back if you don't submit that application.
And there's actually on USA Jobs right now, if you search it by St. Louis 2210s, there's the top 2 positions that come up. I'm looking at right now is the Air Force or the Information Technology Specialist. They're both Palace Acquire positions. So this is an internship program coming in through the DoD. They bring you in and they rotate you through different positions, so you kind of get that experience. So knowing that those positions are out there, and you learn about that by going out to the Air Force's civilian website, and there's a whole section on there that talks about those different internship programs. What's it like? What's a student look like coming into the Air Force? So knowing that, I think is a big deal. The other one, you kind of it surprises me all the different government agencies that we don't think about. Because we've got positions out there for GSA. We've got positions out there for the IRS. NGA's here, Transcom, DHS, DISA. I mean, there's a ton of different government agencies out there. And the other thing that I think is cool to point out too is that, especially in the cyber arena, we're realizing that we have to be competitive, right? When it comes to hiring and providing, basic benefits, right? So we see a lot more remote positions. And as you scroll through USA Jobs, you're going to see that there's a number of positions out there. There's one right here for the Federal Acquisition System, GSA, that's a remote job anywhere in the United States. And then also the different agencies are now establishing new civilian management systems that allows them to be more competitive with pay. It allows them to be more competitive with hiring, like offering bonuses and things like that. So take a look at those. Like, for instance, DHS has the civilian management, the Cyber Civilian Management System, CTMS. This is a process where you go and apply, and it's I think it's 4 different steps of the interview process. And they assess your abilities, and you get put into a pool of qualified individuals. And then when a position comes up, they'll offer that position up to you, right? DoD went a different way. They went with this cyber accepted service. And through that service, they're able to offer different bonuses and, kind of make that pay a little more, I'm not going to say close, but it's a little more competitive. It's kind of getting up there better to when we start looking at the private sector.
So the elephant in the room here, right, is always the sticky security clearance, right? So all the agencies that we have talked about generally is going to require security clearance.
Yes.
And, the old adage, if you can't get a job without a clearance, you can't get a clearance without a job, and that's become it's gotten better over the last 2 or 3 years. They changed departments who were managing, so the turnaround time is much quicker. But I know that's always been a barrier oftentimes for a lot of folks to get into maybe some federal service jobs. What advice or thoughts would you have on clearance stuff?
So I'll tell you, do not let a clearance sway you from applying for a position. As we screen candidates, clearance status is not something we can look at, right? So if we come across a qualified candidate that doesn't have a clearance, well, you'll be sitting in the hiring pipeline for a little bit as they do that background investigation. And depending on the agency and the position you're applying for, sometimes we can even bring them in on what we call an interim clearance. So, and an interim clearance can usually be applied for and awarded fairly quickly. We're talking a number of months. But if you don't have a clearance and you're going after a position that requires a clearance, just know that in that, you don't have to have it, and it's not something that we can use as a disqualifier for somebody. So at no point when you're being compared against another candidate, we don't take into consideration whether or not you have a clearance. We're looking at your skills, your abilities, your knowledge to fill that position. So don't let that be something to keep you from not applying. Just keep in mind, if you're going for a position that's like a top secret clearance, you'll probably be waiting for 2, 3, 4 months maybe before that clearance gets approved and you actually get a start date.
So what, for those that may or may not know, what is a typical background check for a secret clearance or top secret clearance? What does that generally entail for somebody, right? Like I know for me, with legalization of marijuana all across the country and other things that are changing, like the game has been changed a little bit in security clearances, right? Where I think that has some impact on federal stuff. But what advice or thoughts would you add to, just around kind of things are looking for clearances?
Yeah, I mean, your typical background investigation, you're going to get a nice big application to fill out, and they're going to want to know, depending on what level of clearance you're going for, determines how far back they're going to go. But they're going to want to know, what your family status looks like, who your different family members, where you've lived over the last number of years, if you've been, convicted of anything, that type of stuff to be in your past. Be honest, put it on there. I can't speak to whether or not, the legalization of marijuana, how that's going to affect the clearance. I haven't seen that myself. But I definitely know there's folks in the military or in federal service that have that in their past, and they were still able to get clearances.
I know it adds an extra wrinkle, right? And I know the one. So when I was a drill sergeant, we did a lot of SF-86s, which is the form you fill out for the security clearance. And generally, drug usage, obviously not hard drugs, but, for like marijuana, generally wasn't that big of an issue, right? As long as, to your point, you disclosed it, right? Like, it was when you got into the scenario of like, oh, I've never used it, but they go and check 2 or 3 people in your background and do kind of character witness stuff. And they're like, oh man, Tony was a pothead and did all these things. Like, then, okay, well, there's a discrepancy in that. But I also know credit score plays a very large part in background checks, right? Like there's a big aspect of that.
Yeah. And so you remember the reason they're going after that clearance, they're doing that investigation, is to understand, basically, are you trustworthy, right? Are you gonna be able to protect, our national secrets is really what it comes down to. When you get to credit score, if people are having money issues, that's one of the ways that our adversaries will try to entice somebody to give up, that critical information. So there's reasons why they're looking at it, but that definitely can be a frustration.
Yeah, I know the process has gotten much better. I mean, I think secrets are 3 to 6 months now, and at one point they were 12 to 18 to 24 months for a period, because the wait list was so large. And I know they've added some technologies, because a big part of this is a secret clearance is generally 5-7 years. No, 10 years, and I think a top secret is 3 to 5.
Something like that. Those numbers have changed recently. They kind of go back and forth. I haven't really kept track of those, but you're right. That time frame can take a while. But if you've been selected for a position, okay, you've gone through the interview process. The first thing they're going to give you is a tentative job offer. It's called the TJO. That's what we refer to it as. Once you get that tentative job offer, that position's yours. Until they get through unless they find some kind of discrepancy where they can't grant you the clearance, or something else comes out, or you back away, that position's yours. So that, like I said, it could take a month up to 6 months before you actually get that final job offer, the FJO, right? In that process, don't hesitate to ask questions. I found when I was handling the hiring process for my unit, the Air Force, when I got there, our onboarding process was taking 6 to 8 months. But as I dove down into the process and started asking questions, why is this taking so long? Why is this taking so long? When I left, we were onboarding people in 3 to 4 months. And that was with full TSSCI clearances. So even as the applicant, or, the candidate, reach out to your points of contact that are doing the onboarding and ask them a question. Why is this taking so long? It may be sitting on somebody's desk and somebody's just not asking the question.
Yeah. Well, it's already 1:29. It's amazing how quick 30 minutes goes every single time. So,
absolutely.
And I encourage you, if you haven't, Chris is a fantastic person. I've had the pleasure to
Thank you.
know him, I don't know, 5 or 6 years now. Even when he was in uniform, we knew each other, and he volunteered with us and has done some great things. So glad to see that you landed, at CISA, and a resource for all the small, mid-sized businesses. If you're not
Absolutely.
located in Missouri, I assure you there's a Chris in another city, that's
Absolutely.
there for you. And the cross collaboration that you guys do with Highway Patrol and local law enforcement and
Yep.
FBI really is a testament of just the full spectrum of opportunities that CISA provides. And beyond that, I think CISA has done an incredible job of really looking at national security, looking at critical infrastructure, making investments into those things, helping, making investments into states to help them bolster their security practices. Because there's a lot of stuff, right? There's a lot of things. And it's easy to forget. And when we think about our own kind of personal devices or work devices, but
Absolutely.
This has an impact in all of our lives, whether it's electric, water, anything that's out there that we got to do. So,
yeah, it's a team effort. We all have to work together. So
what piece of advice would you give for those that are listening to how they would level up their careers?
There's tons of free training opportunities that are available. There's lots of online resources. If you're familiar with SANS has a veterans program. You've got the CyberUp stuff that Tony's doing. So look for those places where you can up your skills, right, yourself, and then network, talk to folks, find a mentor, ask them, what's the position look like. You can go look at the NICE framework, which is the framework that categorizes every one of the different roles within cyber for the government, and it'll tell you what those KSAs are. And the areas you can focus on. And then again, back to what I said before, network, and ask lots of questions.
Networking is great advice. I appreciate it. So, for next week's show, Chris, again, thank you for joining us today. Really excited about next week. We're going to change it up. I feel like we've covered a little bit about kind of pathways and careers the last 2 weeks, but we're going to get a little more technical around the idea of chatbots and how they can be threats, right? You hear more and more about ChatGPT and AI and automation and the impact it's going to have on the lives we live. And, there's good and the bad and the ugly of all those things. So we're going to dive into that with David next week. And then the following week, we'll have Matt Peterson from GuidePoint, who's going to join us. We're going to talk about why is it so hard to break into cyber, right? Like it really is. That first role can be a challenge and in finding that where you fit. So we're going to dive in a little bit more, and some advice and tips and tricks and peel the layers behind the curtain a little bit around why it is so hard to break into it. So, Chris, appreciate you joining today. Look forward to seeing you on Thursday at the Tech STL Tech Week event. And then for those that are listening, thank you so much for joining us. And until next time, have a great week.
Thanks again, Tony.